Welcome to Whole Team Eats Podcast, a 24/8 media production. Ever wonder who trains your favorite athlete? Join Tim Miller as he takes a look at the behind-the-scenes training of professional and collegiate athletes. Tim connects with trainers, athletes, and others in the sports community to share their stories. This podcast is dedicated to highlighting the work of athletes and trainers to inspire action and build community.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to an all-new episode of Whole Team Eats Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 3. I'm your host, Tim Miller, and on this show, I sit down with Lawrence Barnett of X3 Performance and PT. Growing up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Lawrence always had a dream to play in the NFL. His mom worked 3 jobs, and this fueled his desire to help his mom in any way possible. Although the NFL wouldn't work out, during this journey, he found a deep-rooted passion for training. On the show, we discuss a youth training program called Athletes with a Purpose, helped him not only with training, but with mentorship to receive a scholarship. Lawrence would receive a full ride to Indiana University, where he played football and got his bachelor's in kinesiology during this time. With a passion for training and understanding the science behind it, Lawrence now trains several collegiate and professional athletes with a successful combine program that is rapidly expanding. It's my pleasure to introduce Lawrence Barnett of X3 Performance and Physical Therapy. Lawrence, welcome to the show.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. Thank you, Tim.
So I know we connected sometime in the past year and heard a lot about your background, obviously playing collegiate football and then obviously kind of rolling that into where you are today in your training business. But just for our listeners, could you give us a background of how your training has been in 2022?
Oh, yeah. In 2022, I made some big life changes, as we talked about a little bit before. Have ownership and still have ownership in a gym in Fort Wayne, Indiana called Traction Athletic Performance, kind of where, the guys that you've talked to me about, like Jalen back here, his jersey's hanging up, Jalen Smith and Jesse Bates and other guys that are in the NFL that I've trained, I started training them there. And in the last year, my business partner now and the guy that I train with now, Jordan Llewellyn, kind of recruited me to come out here and partner with him. So moved my family out here last December. I had an experience with him where we were training about 40 NFL guys or prospects last year to get ready for the NFL Combine. We had 11 guys drafted and currently have about 26 or 27 guys on active rosters. So, moving out here and doing that, and then also tying, the physical therapy aspect into it, it's taken training to a whole other level from what I've been used to in Fort Wayne. So, it's been a great 2022. Been on the ground real hard, recruiting some guys for 2023, trying to have an even better class than we did last year. So you should see, bowl games are coming up, so we should get, by January 2nd, we should have about another good round of about 20 draft picks, hopefully, going into 2023.
Yeah, and when you say here, so you were from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and now Fort Myers, Florida, is where you've moved your family and expanded your training business. Is that correct?
Yeah. So came from Fort Wayne, and now I'm in Fort Myers. I a partner, shareholder in X3 Performance and Physical Therapy out here in Fort Myers, as well as in Fort Wayne, Indiana, with Traction Athletic Performance. But really, I just came out here to partner with Jordan Llewellyn. Like I said, he was training in Nashville, doing pretty much the similar things, more on just the straight combine aspect of it. And he came out here and partnered with him for that. So I'm out here now.
Yeah, and it seems like you're rapidly expanding your client base, and I know you focus primarily on collegiate and professional football players. And that was kind of your background. So why don't we just take a step back for a second and tell our listeners about your background, where you grew up, You played football, where you went to college, and then
Yeah,
how that kind of rolled into your training business, and how did you find a passion for training after your athletic career ended?
for sure, for sure. So, born and raised Fort Wayne, Indiana. That, like I said, where Traction Athletic Performance is. I went to a small private school there called Bishop Lewis High School, where Jalen Smith went to, Anthony Spencer, Deshaun Thomas. You know, I think we had a couple other NFL guys, but those are big names that came out of that high school. And I ended up being recruited and had a full ride to Indiana University. Played there for 4 years. Graduated, got my bachelor's there in kinesiology, and then new coaching staff. Everybody knows the portal's crazy right now, right? So we didn't have a portal back then, but it was situations where sometimes you get a new coaching staff and they want to play their own players. I felt like it was my time to move on, so ended up going to Alabama A&M in Huntsville, Alabama for a year. Did my master's there in social work. Very great experience. I love helping people, so that's really kind of why I did that. But also just to focus on football and have another year of football. But I definitely got into social work and loved it, and because that was my passion, helping people. So I wanted to do a little bit of that. But I also knew that I had my dreams of going to the NFL. Uh, but in that process, I was still learning a lot about strength and conditioning, right? So once I figured out, I had a couple of workouts to get in the NFL, it didn't pan out. Um, Battled a lot of injuries, did the Arena One thing for a little bit. But the whole time when I was basically, how I got recruited was going through a training program, kind of like what I do now back home and trying to build here in Fort Myers, but went through a youth training program to the point where you help guys get recruited through mentorship, through physical abilities, all that stuff. Then they, get college offers and everything, and then end up going pro, kind of like Jesse Bates and Jalen Smith, the guys that I know you've um, posted some stuff of me working them out in the past and stuff. So that's kind of really where my passion came in at. Going through a company like Athletes with the Purpose that was originally in Fort Wayne when I was growing up taught me a lot about character development, but also the performance aspect of it. And I was a guy that loved being in the weight room, loved speed, loved the science behind how both of those collide to be able to create a good athlete. So that's kind of why I got into doing what I do now. And then, next thing you know, training a couple college athletes, like you said, starting in high school, training a couple college guys. Guys end up in the NFL. People like Jesse Bates, and I still have the blessing of training him now up until this day. So that's kind of like a quick, brief overview of how I got my passion into training, and then also still doing it, why I'm still doing it.
Yeah, and it's an incredible journey that you've come on in such a short period of time. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into becoming a collegiate and professional athlete outside of just strictly your physical abilities. You say character building, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes with trainers and other mentors to help push you along, not just as an athlete, but to build you as a person and be able to deal with the different, there's injuries that certain athletes have to overcome, and staying motivated and making sure that you're on that path to success all day, every day, and you're not kind of veering off from, hey, it's great if you're working out all the time, but growing as a person, maturing as a person, and making sure that everything's kind of in order when it comes to training and athletics as well. So I know that you've trained some of these big names, Jalen Smith, Jesse Bates. Obviously, you've trained somebody who's played in the Super Bowl just last year, Jesse Bates with the Cincinnati Bengals. I usually talk to a lot of our trainers about how they actually got their first athlete. It seems like in your case, you grew up and went to high school with some of these athletes. So I guess that is a connection. But what difficulty was it in getting your classmates or former teammates, because they're right in the same age as you, to trust you with their training? Like that's not a small decision. It's they make millions of dollars playing their respective sports, and the number one thing for them is to make sure that they're on the field in the best shape possible. Um, but what is that like for them? Like, what does that mean to you that they trust you with their training?
Yeah. So like, for the record, I didn't go to school with Jesse or Jalen. I trained them. I started training them through the same company that trained me. So um, I didn't go to school with them. But in that situation, I think the biggest thing in this industry, what I've learned and what I've got, at first they had trainers before me, right? I started training Jesse when he was a senior in high school, but when he went to college and I started, really getting involved training him, I think what happened was he saw different results than he ever seen in his life, and I think that's the biggest thing. I think for you to be able to get the right athletes in this industry is one, knowing what you're talking about, right? But some of the players don't even know what they're talking about. But being able to educate a player as you're training them and then them see themselves getting those results, I think that's a big deal. I think that's kind of why Jesse put his trust in me. I know, I remember, I'll never forget it. I think it was 2020 during COVID year. That was a big year for when I actually got a chance to train Jesse for an entire off season. In the past, being in Indiana, he would be there. Obviously, his family's there, so he would train with me for about 3-4 weeks. Then he would be in Florida, out here in Florida, and that was another big reason why I wanted to come to Florida, because I'm like, all right, well, if I'm in Florida, I could probably, these pro guys that are from Indiana or not even from Indiana or other places, it'd be easier for me to, get access to training them and showing them that I can be somebody that can help elevate their game, right? Just being somewhere where there's a beach and sun all the time. So, but I think that's the biggest thing. And to answer your question, is just being able to know what you're talking about, but then also show them that you can help them get the results that they want. And once that happens, then it's like, just like any other business, right? Here at X3, we just opened the doors January 2nd, even though, I have a lot of experience, and Jordan basically has been doing the same thing in Nashville. And we just came together and opened it up here, but we just opened the doors here. And the way that we are growing and getting a lot of people to know about us is because we got that first person, whether it was general prep, physical therapy, combine related, collegiate, whatever. We've had all those people come through the door so far. And once they have the results that they want and they love the customer service, all that stuff and above, then they ended up, it's word of mouth thing, right? It's a word of mouth thing. They were able to tell somebody else, and then somebody else knew, and then next thing you know, we're rolling. So, I would say in Fort Wayne and in here, I've seen that. That's the biggest thing. Just being able to show people that you know what you're talking about, you care, and then that you can get the results that are needed.
Yeah, I think the work speaks for itself, right? So you see the results, and they say, I've had a great time training with, Lawrence at X3, and the results really speak for themselves on the field for some of your players that you have trained, especially Jesse Bates being one of them. But a key part in something that you mentioned was communication. So your job is to train athletes, but a big part of your job is to make sure that you're able to clearly communicate why you're doing certain workouts, why it's important, how it's making them get better, but also allowing them to understand and comprehend why you're doing what you're doing, so that in the time where
Mm-hmm.
they're not spending, those training hours in the gym with you, they're able to still go ahead and kind of do that themselves, or go to a gym
Yeah.
and kind of implement the plan that you have in place for them. How big of a
Yeah.
piece is communication nowadays, and what type of emphasis do you put on it with your athletes?
It's huge. It's huge. I think, like you said, like I said a little bit ago, like my biggest thing is, we get athletes. We don't really train athletes too much in season, right? At least here in Florida. So, with them coming off of the in season, being able to tell them like, hey, you just got off the season. We're not going to load you with a whole bunch of weight or make your intensity of your workout super crazy, just because you just came off of a lot of them, like a person like Jesse or Jalen, are taking a lot of load right now in season, right? So being able to communicate and let them know, like, hey, this is the plan. Fresh out of season, we're not going to go crazy for the first month or so. Then the next month, we'll go into the next phase where we'll start picking it up a little bit, working on a little bit more strength, working on a little bit more power stuff, and then so on and so on. So I think that communication, especially when you're talking about a professional athlete, them being able to say, okay, like, that makes sense. This guy knows what he's talking about. He knows what he's doing. And, at the end of the day, the NFL is not for long. So to be able to create good plans for guys to, one, keep their bodies fresh, but then also keep them in sport and playing at a high level, I think if you communicate that to them, that's another thing that gives them the satisfaction of, all right, I'm working with a trainer that knows what he's talking about. I can let my friends know, this DB that plays with me over here, like, hey, he needs to come work out. I saw that he needs to get stronger. He needs to work on this. Come work with LB or LB and Jordan at X3. Things like that. I think communication plays a big role in. I think that I would say that's the only form of communication that I could see. Obviously, you should be communicating if you're going to be late or something like that, but that doesn't happen in my world. I don't, that, for me, when combine rolls around, like my partner Jordan, we start at 7, he's here at 5, I'll be in at 5:15, like we don't believe in being late, so, but yeah, that, I think communication is a big part, just to let people know that they're working with somebody that is very knowledgeable about what they're doing.
Yeah, and you've touched on your combine program. So the combine program, since you've started there, has expanded. Can you tell us a little bit about the combine program and where it is right now, and then what you hope to grow it to in the future?
Yeah, so like I said, my partner Jordan had been doing it in Nashville for, I believe, 4 or 5 years. 4 or 5 years before we came out to Fort Myers. And before then, I believe we had about 16 draft picks, or maybe 20. I don't know, 20 something. Well, we had 11 this year, so we had 16. Yeah, 16 before this year, right? So after 2022, we just had 11 draft picks after this year. But like I said, 26 guys on 53-man roster. And then this year, obviously us being in Florida now, when the location was Nashville last year, it just helps us a lot more from a recruiting and, just getting guys here standpoint. So I do believe, with the things that we've been doing this year, I could already say that we're probably going to have anywhere from 16 to 20 draft picks this year. And I think, my goal, and I know Jordan's goal, is definitely to be able to, have that rolling every year. Like, our goal is to have 20 plus draft picks every year. And then also, get to the point where it's exclusive to certain people. This year we'll probably take 35, but then, 1 year, we want to get to the point where we're taking 25, and they're all draft picks, and we know they're all going to get drafted, and then, but I think with the way we're going right now, I think that we're just going to be elevating, and I think we'll be one of those companies around the country where you talk about, all right, well, these are the guys that you're seeing at the combine a lot of. Right now you hear about the Exos, which, taking nothing from them, they've been doing this for a long time, right? They are who everybody talks about if you talk about combine performance prep. But I honestly believe, and I know that in the next couple of years, X3 Performance and Physical Therapy will be one of those names that you have to put at that list up there when you're talking about sports performance across the country, for sure.
Yeah, and it's just because of the level of draft picks that you guys have been going year in, year out to, players going to the combine and getting drafted. And I think that's great that, you decided to bet on yourself and make that jump from Fort Wayne, Indiana to Fort Myers, Florida. And that's helped grow your business exponentially. You're right, because a lot of these clients, right, they want to be in those warm weather locations. We hear a lot of trainers come on our podcast and, they're down in in Florida, Louisiana, Texas, California, which you mentioned, Exos out in California. And it really allows you, it doesn't limit you to how you can grow your business. It's pretty easy to get clients to want to come train in Florida opposed to Indiana or other parts of the country, which is great for X3 and the way that you guys are planning to scale your combine program. One thing I wanted to touch on, and you deal with a lot of the different athletes. A lot of athletes are in that phase of going to the combine. I'm assuming they're pretty self-motivated, but do you find it difficult, or do you find there's a difference with certain athletes or certain sports to keep players motivated, or are they pretty much self-motivated for the most part?
I don't think it's more of a sport thing where you figure that out. I think it's more of like an upbringing type thing. I think I think that uh, in every sport you're gonna find people that are self motivated, right? You're gonna find people that you don't need to tell to show up early to do stuff extra, or stay later to do stuff extra, or go 110% in every workout and every sprint. There's guys that are just naturally like that, but I also think that there's some people that maybe had a little bit of different backgrounds, right? Like a little bit of different upbringings. Like, for me growing up, my mom worked 3 jobs, and like the reason why I always went so hard is because I wanted to see my mom not work 3 jobs. Even though I didn't make it to the NFL, but that bled into the characteristics of my work ethic, how I prepared and approached the game. And I think that is some of the things you see now. I think that, a lot of times that it comes off of the experience of parents, right? Like, you see a lot of wealthy parents out here who really busted their butt to be wealthy. They're going to bleed that into their kids, like teach them those principles to bust their butt to get what they want, right? It's the same thing. And then, but, I guess that's not really self-motivation, but the kid, because of the parent being like that, adapts that or adopts that self-motivation, right? So, I think I wouldn't characterize that by a sport. I would say that more like just kind of how kids are brought up, and how they're taught in their household, basically.
Yeah, and I know that every single day is, different athletes, different things are going to happen. Like some days, they're having a bad day or an off day, and it's your job to focus them and keep them kind of, cued in on what we're doing and the task at hand with training, and saying, it might be part of your job to ask what's going on or making sure that they're all right part of the time. But when you get down to it, you want to say, all right, what can I do to help you? How do we keep you motivated? We have the combine coming up, and there's a lot of pressure that comes along with that. So motivation, pressure for these athletes. Yeah. You're somewhat of a behavioral coach in a sense, in addition to your regular training background as well. One thing I wanted to also mention.
Well, real quick, one thing on that with the combine guys. Now, I didn't know you were talking about combine guys. So now, if you're talking about combine guys, and if you have a guy that you need to self-motivate at this point of their career, getting ready for the NFL draft or NFL combine, they're not going to pan out in the NFL. You know what I mean? Like that's just the truth about it, because it's like, there's, when you think about how many kids there are playing high school football right now and how many guys end up being in college football, and then only 250 people invited to the NFL combine, and there's 254 people that get drafted, I think, in the year. Like, when you think about that, there's no time for you to not have any self-motivation. At this point in your career, you're a part of the elite athletes. Like, if you're here training at X3, it's because you did something very elite, and you're going to be part of that 1% that either gets drafted or picked up in the NFL. So it's like, if you're coming here and we need to self-motivate you, then, or help you get self-motivated, then, I mean, I wouldn't bet on that person getting in the NFL, to be honest. But then also, I think one thing that we do here, that we have a, mental performance coach here too, that definitely talks to kids, because at that time of the combine, there's a lot of anxiety going through kids' mind. That's another thing. When you talk about mental health and everything like that, but there's a lot of anxiety to be able to really run the fastest time, hit 225 as much as you can. It's a tough time because everybody wants to be that guy, right? So I think that when you talk about a self motivation standpoint, I think that people like that, like people that can help with mental performance, can be really good in that aspect for sure.
Yeah, I think that's something that's extremely underrated are those sports perform like the coaches who help you on the mental side of things as well. Because you're right, this is the biggest time of their lives for some of these athletes for that opportunity to make it into the NFL. And it's your job to help kind of walk them through that process and check on them daily and obviously train them and get them ready to run the 40 time and the bench press and everything else that they have to train for. Obviously, you've started your training business in the last 4 to 5 years, and I'm assuming it's not just you fall out of bed one day and you're a partner in the gym and everything just went smooth. Obviously, COVID was one thing that every trainer had to deal with. But what issues or setbacks did you have to deal with?
Um, I mean, really, I don't. Let me think. That's a good question. Setbacks like you said, just really COVID. That was one of the big setbacks because there's still expenses that still have to go out, and there's not a lot of people training. That's a big thing. But other than that, it's just continuing to fill out, just to figure out. I mean, not really setbacks, but I would say like um, a lot of brainstorming. I wouldn't say a lot of setbacks, but brainstorming on how you can keep evolving every year, right? Like, all right, like for back home in Fort Wayne, we reached. I would say I think one year we had like 20 scholarship offers, right? All right, so now how can we keep evolving and continue that, right? Continue to raise the bar on that. Like this year we had 11 draft picks, 11 draft picks in 2023. How can we keep evolving to get to the 20 that we're looking at this year, right? So I wouldn't say too many. I would say I've been blessed in the situation to not really have too many setbacks yet, and I hope I don't ever have any setbacks. But I think the biggest thing, and I think one thing that's really helped me in my situation right now, I've always gotten around good people, right? So like back home, my partner Dre Muhammad, who trains a lot of wide receivers around the country. Trains a lot of wide receivers that are currently in the NFL, like Austin Mack, Ben Skoranek, D. Estridge. Um, you know, I've always been around good partners like him that can help things be a little bit easier, right? And then now I came to Fort Myers and I'm in X3 and I partner with somebody who's been doing strength and speed at a high level on his own for combine guys for the last 4 to 5 years, right? And now I'm just coming in and helping it grow even more, right? So it's like I personally haven't been put in a situation just yet to be like, all right, like what's my next move? I don't know what I'm gonna do, like those type of setbacks. So, but I would say to answer that, to elaborate a little bit more on that question, the reason I haven't had those setbacks is because I've made sure that I partner with the right people, if you understand what I'm saying. So, and it makes life, it makes job, it makes everything else that much easier for sure.
Yeah, it can't be understated enough the importance of a mentor and finding the right partners and mentors to guide you because everybody has made mistakes in every single business that they've got started. And it just, for you, you've been fortunate enough to be in the position where you've partnered and found mentors in your industry to guide you along and kind of steer you clear of some of the early mistakes that maybe they've made early in their careers and have helped you avoid some of those repeat mistakes in the launch of your career, which is great that you're able to identify mentors and partners that are right for your trajectory, right? So where you want to
Yeah,
be
for sure.
moving forward has been made possible because of the partners that you found. So when we're talking about moving forward, what are your plans for X3 or Traction or yourself personally in the next
Hmm.
5 years? Like where do you see yourself in 5 years from now?
Yeah, 5 years from now, I see. myself right here in Fort Myers, right here in Fort Myers, Florida. Either, you know, I can't show you the facility right now, but we have 27 banners on the wall. But my goal is to be right here in Fort Myers with 100 banners around the whole gym of guys that have been drafted, um, continuing to elevate as a great strength and conditioning coach, as well as a good DB coach and linebacker coach around the country. So that's really where I see myself at, just to continue elevating and doing exactly what I'm doing now, but just on a even more national level, really.
Yeah, and Fort Myers, Florida is not a bad place to want to be in 5 years. It's a
No,
great place to
no,
train, great place to live. So you're very
yeah.
fortunate to be where you are today. And just to start to wrap up here, something I like to kind of close out a lot of our episodes with and ask some of our trainers. For you, it might be a little bit different, but what advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your training journey that you know now that you didn't know then? And
hmm
on top of that, would you change anything about your journey to this point?
I think one thing I would say, like, once I came to Fort Myers and I partnered with my partner Jordan, I think a lot of things that he did I would probably do over, right? I kind of interned locally when I got into training. He kind of interned all over, right? I interned at a college in Fort Wayne a little bit. Then I interned with some other certified strength and conditioning coaches in Fort Wayne that taught me a lot. Don't get me wrong. Like I very thankful for them, blessed to have them in my life. But I think all my situation where, like I told you, my parents didn't. I wasn't raised in a situation where my parents had a lot, so I didn't have like the I guess the strength. I wanted to say another word, but I'm not gonna say it. But it was a little bit of a fear factor of like jumping ship and going to like do certain internships and certain things where I wasn't gonna be paid for it, right? Because I knew that I didn't have a lot of backing on that aspect. So I think if I could do things over, it would be more of like taking a little leap earlier, and doing things where I probably wouldn't got paid at first for it, but then would have helped me a little bit more. I think that's one of the biggest things I would have did if I could like take myself back, because there's a lot of things um, that I you know probably just learned like 3 years ago that I probably should have learned 9 years ago when I started, right? Even though, it's still fine, because I think that the way you continue to be good, and I think the way that I'm growing is always starting over, like always believing that I'm still at the beginning, right? And I still got more to prove, more to learn, and doing things like that. So I think that's one thing that I would say is one of my strengths, because I don't really have a huge ego to be like I know everything, right? So I think that is what helps me now. But I think if I could go back 5 years from today, would just be take that leap a little earlier and do everything you can to try to rub shoulders with other people, and just learn as much as you can. For sure.
Yeah, and I think that's key for a lot of trainers is to stay self motivated themselves to continually learn and push themselves to become the best version of themselves when it comes to training, and just to just remain humble and say I don't know everything about training, and I'm constantly want to learn new things to then pass that along to my clients, because you need to keep evolving and developing as a trainer, because the better you are at training, the better your athletes are going to be, and the more that your name and your gym is going to spread word of mouth. They're going to say, "Hey, did you see what Lawrence's guys are doing at X3?" And people will take notice of their training pretty quickly, as you've seen. Have some guys going to the combine. You're having 20 plus people getting drafted. That doesn't go unnoticed, and pretty soon you will have all those banners around the gym when you do have 100, 150 banners of drafted guys. So once again,
Sure.
Lawrence Barnett, X3 Performance and Physical Therapy, we love having you on the show. Thanks for cutting out time, and we will be keeping our audience up to date on everything that you're doing at X3 as you move forward. We're really looking forward to it.
I appreciate it, Tim. Anytime.
Thanks, Lawrence.